Hello, hello. So, for any Universes folk watching this, I'd said on a recent news update that you'd probably see some altered stuff popping up here pretty soon, and here we are. If you have no idea what this is, as per usual, I'm gonna have a bunch of links in the description with, various bits that should be useful, some, intro rule sheets and some things like that. Would appreciate it if you'd give it a look, because I'm very excited about this game, but otherwise, not going to stop making UVS videos, obviously. I'm going to have probably a news update over the weekend. We've had some interesting things going on. And I have a Dark Tournament preview, I believe, next Friday, so please look forward to that. For Altered Peeps, hi, my name is Tim. As you've probably surmised, this is generally a Universes channel, but I'm very excited for Altered, and being that I'm on the hype train and I have this channel and I kind of like making videos and I can certainly ramble into the void about Altered for quite a while, hey, why not record some stuff, see how it goes? It's going to be a pretty active next 6 weeks with the Kickstarter and whatnot, so, we're getting into the marketing lead up. As most of you probably know, we're starting to get some final starter deck reveals. And so I was kind of thinking about, what I wanted to do. I didn't just kind of want to ramble about all the cards and then close out the video or anything like that. So what I want to sort of make it the goal for this video is, we are going to go through all the cards and all the families and all the stuff that we've seen. We've got our Kellen Elementals up there to start. But I'm trying to approach this from the state of, say, you're, I guess, way in the future, right? In August, September, or whatever, you're just starting out the game and you're looking to do just a very super budget starter build. But you want to have like some deck building involved, so you say you buy 3 of a starter deck. Say you buy 3 of this Axiom starter deck. And, the decks come with mostly 3Xs, but because of the rarity system, you're still going to have some decisions to make, notably which rares you're going to run. So as I go through this, I want to be trying to think about and pick apart, what's the value in each rare upgrade here. Now, some of these rares aren't in the starter deck itself. We just can see the full families because that's how they're showing off the cards. But we'll talk about those anyway, and then at the end, I'll have sort of these are the 5 rares I would pick and any common decisions that would go along with that. Obviously, I'm not an expert, nobody is. I've played like 30 games or something like that, so, all takes are valid. You'll feel free to jump in the comments afterwards and be like, no, you really should be running that card or whatever. Could be a pretty fun conversation piece. But yeah, with all of that intro out of the way, get underway. First and foremost, obviously, we have Sierra up above. And, I don't want to talk too much about the 2023 demo decks. Most people, if somebody happens to be watching this in like a month or 2 months or something, those are going to be ancient history. So what we have with Sierra is a refund on our 3 cost or more permanents, essentially. We get to exhaust her and get a nice little 2/2/2 Brass Bug, which is about a 2 mana rate, right? So kind of a pseudo 2 mana reduction on the first permanent we play each day. That doesn't necessarily mean we want to be playing a permanent every day. These are still going to be, you're going to get the permanence effect, right? But you might, paying for and getting a Brass Bug and some long-term effect might not be the best thing on every single day. So it'll be an interesting deck building, exactly how many permanents you want to play. This starter comes with 11 permanents, I believe. We'll probably end up running somewhere around there just to kind of trust in the ratios, but it is a little spooky if you, late game situation, you need to draw something useful at dawn and you just get 2 permanents, and that's kind of ugly. So I may go down on that count a little bit, but anyway, getting into the cards. This deck and these Axiom Sierra starter cards have a bit of a resupply reserve theme. So first and foremost, we have Kellen Elemental, who is a 3/3/1 for a 2/2, which is a little bit above rate. You figure, just as I was saying before, the base rate for a 2 cost is a 2/2/2, but like 6 total stats. It's a little above rate. You get a little bit of value out of having the 2 higher biomes and the 1 lower biome, provided it's not, day 1, day 2, and you've sort of found your way into the middle of the map. But because of that, he has this quote-unquote drawback where you have to put a card from your hand into your reserve. And his rare upgrade makes that optional. And my sort of thought on this is if you're gonna run the Kellen Elemental, you should be pretty confident that you're gonna be happy to put something in your reserve most of the time. So making it optional is a bit of a weird choice to really want badly enough to have available that you're going to spend some rare slots on it. But I could see a scenario in the full card pool where maybe there's one card in your deck that's, you know, really crazy if you can just put it in your reserve or hit it on a resupply or whatever. And then maybe you want the rare one because it's only really has 3 or 6 whatever good targets, right? But in terms of the base deck situation, I don't think that rare is very interesting, but I also don't think that rare is in the deck. So kind of a moot point there. And just real quick on the faction shift, we've got a Muna Kellen Elemental. Muna also has some number of cards that are definitely better played out of the reserve. Think about Daughter of Yggdrasil, if you've seen that card. So that makes sense for them, and it just starts out as the Yume. Again, pretty similar. It's very hard to evaluate how good just changing a must to a May is on a like pseudo drawback, pseudo benefit kind of ability like this, but neat card to have around for sure. I should be able to page down through this if I've set up correctly. All right, this one I'm excited about, the Foundry mechanic. So 1-drops are very good in Altered because if nothing, you know, not only are they useful on day 1, or, you know, really any day where you're going to have the spare mana, you can sort of drop a body somewhere. You can also lead off a day with them and get a pseudo after you at the cost of 1 mana. And this one, even more than that, gives you a nice from reserve ability. You can trade it back in to get a mana discount on a permanent. You know, all very cool, all very neat. The base common pays for this little ability by not having that 1 in forest, just a 0 in the forest. So in terms of, you know, if you're facing the Axiom deck, it's not quite as exciting because it's going to lose to a token. But, you know, you can still get it in there as your 1-drop little bonus effect, so you're not just playing a bunch of vanilla 1/1/1/1 drops or whatever that do almost nothing. This has a cool little refund you can get later, but the rare version is a 1/1/2, and now it beats the little soldier token, right? And now it beats a lot of their 1/1/1/1 drops. So that is very interesting to me. I think this is pretty good value to be getting for your, you know, 1-cost day 1 / you know, pseudo after you card on top of having that other ability. So I could definitely see myself having an interest in running this rare, because just functionally in terms of the role that your 1-cost characters are playing, that 1/1/2 means a lot more than just like, oh, it's 2 more stats. Right, there's going to be a lot of situations where they're just coming in to sneak an advancement, or, you know, to go up against a 1/1 and token or something like that. Faction shifts into Ortis. I'm assuming we're going to see a bunch of these. I'm guessing Ortis is going to have some sort of secondary permanent base theme, but she also gets to be a 1/1/2 for Ortis, which is pretty wild. And I believe that rare is in the starter. Next we have Axiom Salvager. This is here's our 1-cost 1/1/1, right? Interesting, you can play him from reserve at a 2-cost and get a resupply out of it. I'm a bit of a resupply downer. I don't put a great ton of stock in sort of paying extra mana to get a resupply, but, you know, hey, it's there. It can be handy. You know, this might be someone that doesn't, you know, actually gets chased out of your reserve at some point if you overflow. Sorry for getting myself stuck there a little bit. His rare, which I believe is another one that is not in the starters, is, you know, now we're not paying an extra mana per se to get that resupply, but we are giving up the water stat in exchange for having the cheaper reserve cost. And it depends on how much you value resupply. I don't value it enough to be doing this right now, but, you know, who knows? Nobody's an expert. Could be quite a bit, you know. Certainly, if you have a deck where most of your cards are better off played out of the reserve, this goes up in value. But even then, I think I'd rather have the common in most cases if that's the sort of thing my deck is. Anyway, the faction shift is simply a Bravos version of the common. Hard to comment on that. That might just be, you know, some of these faction shifts are just going to be to even out the number of faction shifts available, right? Make sure everyone has an equal size card pool. Everyone's going to get some faction shifted cards that are just kind of basic like this guy. So that's just fine. Next up, Gion. This guy has a cool 320 stat line. I don't know what to make of a 320 stat line. It means, you know, across the table from a 222 or something, then you're going to kind of trade off. But it's probably good enough not to feel too bad about including that in your deck, as long as you're not, as long as, you know, he's sort of your only I don't do water guy, or maybe you have one other one or something like that. Seems kind of fine where he is. Anyone with a 0 stat like this, a lot of the time, you know, in the mid game, you're really not going to have two chances to feel good about playing him, right? You're trying to dodge water terrain with him, basically. And so it's nice when a card like this has a reserve effect. I believe they're calling them echoes or support abilities. I think it's support ability in the quick rules. So it's nice when these have support abilities, and you can upgrade your Gion to rare to get one and activate the on-play triggers of any of your permanents, which I'm sure can be a wide variety of things. I think in the starter deck we have one where there's a resupply on-play trigger and another one that makes a brass bug, and I think another one just sort of charges up its counters, which you may not get a whole lot of activating, but you never know. Faction shifts into Ortis, just another one of those Ortis permanent sub-theme things. Whether or not we take a Gion upgrade is basically going to depend on how many of those on-play triggers we're playing and how good we feel about them, basically, right? Otherwise, we might as well just play the common. Amelia Earhart. Yeah, she's just pretty good. You know, paying 3 for a 2/2/2 is certainly a bit of an overpay, but on the backside you get a 1-cost 2/2/2, which is nice for sure. One of those cards that is definitely better to just drop it into your reserve off of a resupply or a Kellen Elemental or something. So she fits pretty well into this deck. You can upgrade her to rare, which I believe there's not the rare in this list, in the starter list, to make her a normal rate 3/3 when you play her. And then you get her above rate as a 1-cost 2/2/2 later. That's tricky to rate. I think a lot of rare upgrades are going to be something in the space of, you know, I get 2 or 3 more stat points, but possibly on both plays, and she gets 3 on one play. But, you know, it feels so good to play her and get her into the reserve that maybe this is worth doing. Faction shift. Ortis again. This time not for any permanent reasons. It's just shifted into Ortis. You know, Ortis certainly likes their cheap characters, and, you know, she's a pretty fine one to be playing. All right, next one, 3 Little Pigs. So this one specifies landmarks, which we believe is going to be a subtype of permanence. And if you can get 2 of them, you get an underpriced 3-cost 4/4/4. If you upgrade it to rare, you can get a 3-cost 5/5/5. That condition might not be trivial to meet. It sort of depends on the costs of the permanents in your deck, but you know, this is an on-play, you know, +1/+1/+1 both times for the rare upgrade. And having that in the form of this is now a 3-cost 5/5/5, and it beats, you know, the 4/0/4s that are at 3 costs and things like that is pretty attractive, I think. You'd have to play the deck a few times to try to figure out how often you actually hit 2 landmarks and manage to not get them banished, but on its face, this seems pretty appealing to me. The faction shift is a Bravos, and this is a funny shift where it's the common, but it changes the control 2 to control 1 because, you know, maybe Ortis is going to have 2 landmarks, but probably not too many others. So Bravos just needs to get 1 landmark to get their little overstated guy. The Axiom Scrambler has the word sabotage on it. It's kind of automatically desirable, at least in the scope of what little bit of the card pool that we know. So you're certainly playing this guy. Rare upgrade makes him 3 costs instead of 4. That's probably worth it. The one cost reduction on the first play on the sabotage play. You know, there are going to be turns where you feel like you have to play your sabotage unit, and the mana might not add up. You know, it certainly won't add up as reliably if you're paying 4 instead of 3 in terms of what else you want to do that day. So I really like this rare upgrade, at least for, you know, for the I bought 3x of this starter situation, and you're not gonna have a whole lot of other options for sabotage probably. Maybe in the wider card pool you can just play some other sabotage common that feels better in some way. Anyway, faction shifts into Muna, who possibly doesn't get a whole lot of sabotage otherwise. I mean, we'll see. So that would be the reason to play it in Muna. It's a very not Muna-like ability. So that's kind of a cute shift. Foundry Armorer. I think I've lost track of calling out which rares are and aren't in the starters, but this rare is definitely not in the starter because I would have noticed. This rare is wild. So the common is very much in the vein of Amelia Earhart. You're overpaying the first time and underpaying the second time. In this case, your underpay is 3 costs for a pair of 2/2/2s, which is very, very nice. The rare upgrade lets you underpay twice for a pair of 2/2/2s both times. Which, you know, if you haven't played the game that much, most cases, all cases, you'd rather have 2 bodies than 1. Right, 2/2/2s instead of 1/4/4/4. Both for removal reasons, because you could split them on both 2 different sides if you want. So, very, very nice rare. I could see that rare showing up a lot. The faction shift is Bravos, where it's the common, but -1 on the first play, so you're paying normal rate, which I guess is a little, you know, a bit of an overpay for most Bravos stuff, because Bravos characters tend to be a little more efficient. But, you know, then you still get the 2 bodies later on. So another neat... It's kind of cute seeing the faction shifts that are changing something that is not changed on the rare. So it's not exactly the common, but it's still a different version of a rare upgrade. Next, Kellen Burst. This is the removal spell for Axiom. At least the one in the starter. The rare upgrade for this, on the visual image, the text kind of goes off the card. That is not going to actually be happening in reality. But it says, if you have 2 or more landmarks, you get a brass bug. This is not in the starter. It is a matter of we are paying 4, so we're paying an extra mana. You know, either way. It has fleeting, so we're not paying it twice, no matter what. And so the actual efficiency of our removal goes down. We are at best going to be even trading, but we got a brass bug on the other side, which is, you know, obviously we were talking about before, sort of like a 2 mana discount in a way. Also, you know, saves you a quote-unquote card to get a body on the field. Really interesting one. This is going to be hard to make heads or tails of, because even though you're getting a brass bug out of it, a lot of times you like your removal spells to be costed lower so that you have an easier time fitting them in towards the end of a day. But pretty cool to get a bug when you play a removal spell, so I don't know. The faction shift, this one into Ortis, this is a pretty funny shift. It's just the regular common one, but it is a mirror of an Ortis card that only works on cost 4 or more. So that's a pretty funny shift. I like that one. Next we have Brass Bug Hub. I believe this is a rare. I think there's a bunch of rare permanents, rare landmarks in the Axiom starter deck. I think this is not one of them. But the normal one, you know, charges up with some counters, and then over the course of the next few days, whenever you have a mana to spare, you can make a mana to spare. You get to put one in, get a brass bug out. Certainly a good rate there if you are, especially if you're Sierra and you're getting the brass bug when you play this, then you get a 3 cost 2/2 effectively that lets you churn out a bunch of bugs over the rest of the game, and that's pretty cool. The rare upgrade, it makes sense why this isn't in the Sierra deck because it costs 2 and not 3. But for an Axiom deck that is, you know, trying to go a little bit faster, you could certainly see a day 1 or maybe a day 2 where you play the brass bug hub and then a 2-drop, or a brass bug and then a 1-drop, and try to get stuff going pretty quickly in the mid game and try to overwhelm your opponent pretty quickly. Ortis just gets this as a permanent landmark to add to their, presumably permanent collection that they have otherwise. They're churning out tokens. They like doing that, so it makes sense for them. The Reprocessor, the Axiom Reprocessor. This is the other landmark that does not have a rare in the starter deck. Pretty straightforward. You put it down, you start getting extra cards for the rest, for however long you leave it out there, if not the rest of the game. Not too much to say about this long-term, card advantage kind of stuff. The rare version gives you a resupply on play, and then you're going to start getting extra resupplies. That might run into issues where you're having a hard time keeping your reserve down below 2, and you might end up having to throw away that extra resupplied card. So I'm a little dubious on the value of that one. If you are doing some stuff with unplayed triggers, maybe you're interested. And the shift is just the common into Muna. Similar to the Kellen Elemental, there's reasons why Muna might like resupply, might like putting some things directly in its reserve. So it's just another point for that. See, what's next? Colonic Generator. So this one only has the rare. It's one of the 1x rares in the starter deck. Each starter deck looks like it's going to have 3 1x rares, and then 12 3x commons, I believe, or like 2x common 1x rares for those cards. So this is pretty funny because the rare feels like the only one I might have interest in playing. The common version of this is 3 mana, and I guess if you're Sierra, get a bug. And then 2 mana, and you've paid 5 total, and you've drawn a card. I'm not hugely big on pay 2 mana, draw a card, let alone pay 5, and then 2, and then 7 to draw 2 cards. Sometimes you'll just have 2 mana left over from a situation if things are going a little bit south. Hopefully you always have some 2-cost thing to use there, but I could see it, but it makes a lot more sense as a 4-cost where you're paying 1 to draw the card. Once again, you're making a big upfront investment and getting nothing out of it aside from a bug if you're Sierra, but you're much more often going to have 1 extra mana just sitting there not doing anything. That turning that into a card is great. So I really like the rare of this. Don't know if we'll fit it into our combined starter build, but it's for sure an option. The shift is another permanent on the Ortis pile. I don't know how interested they're going to be. I guess if you have a permanent heavy Ortis deck, you might feel some pressure that you want card draw bad enough to be getting this. Maybe Ortis doesn't have a lot of card draw without shifting stuff in. But most of these, faction shifts are going to be hard to evaluate without the full card pool, really. And then we have the big one, the Brass Bug Hive. So this is a beating in Sierra, because while you are paying 5, you're paying 5 and getting 2 Brass Bugs, which is, a little inefficient, but then you're getting a Brass Bug churned out for the rest of the game, and that's good for sure. The rare lets you pay 6 for 2 3/3/3 bugs, and then your Sierra, if you activate her again going forward, is making 3/3 bugs, and your Foundry Armorer is making 3/3/3 bugs. 6 cost is a lot. This is, unless you use a reserve effect cost reduction thing, you're looking day 4 at the earliest. Depending, a lot of games go 6 or 7 days, I think. So you might not get super value out of this if you don't play it, as soon as you can and just say, all right, day 4, we're just putting our chips down. We're going to put this out. Maybe you get a 1-0 on me or something for doing this, but I'm going to be going wild with Brass Bugs for the rest of the game. That's probably pretty good. That rare's, if nothing else is exciting, it's going to feel really good when it wins you games. The faction shift on this is Izmir. Just scary. Izmir's not going to get a Brass Bug refund when they play this, which makes it quite a bit different. I mean, they're going to get the Brass Bug that it generates, right? But you're paying 5 for a Brass Bug, which is kind of a very Izmir thing to do. It certainly fits in with the theme, at least Akesha's theme of, we're trying to buy a bunch of time and have as much mana available when you run out as possible. that's a pretty good time to drop a Brass Bug Hive with no Sierra trigger. But, you know, maybe it fits in better to other Izmir themes. I could see that. I think in one of the streams they alluded to Izmir having some sacrifice thematics, and churning out bugs you can sack is probably pretty good for that kind of deck. But yeah, the Axiom of this, if nothing else, has big Timmy energy, as they say. You know, we're just gonna turn 6 sideways and try to make a big impact. Alright, and now we get to, so we should have 2 cards left. This is our first Faction Shift 1X, where the card in the deck here is the Shifted in Ouroboros. So we're not going to talk about the Lyra cards here because they're probably in the Lyra deck. That's probably how this is going to work, is that anything that's faction shifted into a starter is going to appear in its normal form in a different one. At least that's how I would guess they would do it. This faction shifted one is really neat, aside from having gorgeous art that I want on a playmat. It has a resupply trigger when you play it. So, you know, again, not the hugest fan of this, but unlike the Reprocessor, I think it is, if I'm not misremembering the name, this isn't going to like keep spam resupplying you and possibly causing a traffic jam there, and this only costs 3 for something that you play where its only effect is a resupply when you play it. But then your resupplies give you some options, which is really cool. I'm going to be pretty excited to play with this card a bit and see how it feels. In Sierra in particular, you are of course getting your Brass Bug on the way, and this seems just like a really, really good deal for her. I would quite like to put this in my list, but it might be a thing where the rare count doesn't add up, right? Because you are stuck. We're gonna pick 5, right? There's might be like a real world situation where we're actually doing some like 2-2 splits or something, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just gonna pick 5 out of the 8 rares that we're playing. And lastly, we have the Faction Shifted Frog Prince as a 1x rare in this deck. This deck is a little light on the water if you sort of scan through the characters that it has. So pretty welcome to have the 2-cost 3/0/3. If you remember, we have a 2-cost 3/2/0 where the 0 is water, so this is kind of counterbalancing that a little bit. Granted, it's a 1x in the base starter deck, but we can play 3 if we want, if we grab 3 of them. He also gains this the From Reserve ability that we saw on another card. I think it was the 1-drop, the Foundry Engineer. I'll remember these names when we play with them a bunch. But turns himself into a mana to play a permanent. You know, again, kind of handy if you're in the middle of the map and you're in some mountains and you can't really make good use of this Frog Prince guy, but you can turn him into mana if you're playing a permanent. And this deck is certainly going to be playing some pricey permanents for sure. I believe that should be the end of it. Yep, that goes down to the bottom of the page. So, with all that said, let me put up on here where I landed for 5 rares that we picked. See if this works. Just about. We should scroll this a little bit. There we go. So you see, I've faded out the cards that were cut or upgraded, basically, so that the non-faded cards are the ones we're actually playing. Maybe could have faded them a little bit more just looking at it now, but anyway. I have gone with the rare Foundry mechanic, the rare Pigs, the rare Scrambler, the Frog Prince, and the Brass Bug Hive here. Now, as I said, I really like the Bastion, but you know, I'm a little bit worried if we play 12 permanents and 3 Kellen bursts, and that's closing in on almost half of our deck is not characters. Even with the Brass Bugs that are coming as part of this, I'm worried about just some bad draws in the mid to late game causing problems. So I would want to try running this at 9 permanents to start. And maybe depending on how things go, especially if like the pigs aren't really reliable enough or something like that, I might shift those guys out, start bringing in some Bastions maybe. Probably most likely some Bastions, maybe get a Colonic generator or 2. Could be a situation where we go down to 2 Brass Hive, right? There's lots of fine-tuning that we do, but I think this is where I would start. As I said before, I think Foundry Mechanic and Axiom Scrambler are kind of slam dunks here. And Frog Prince is just a lean into just trying to get more characters into the deck. It is kind of a neat setup where we have, I believe, 6 different make a permanent cost 1 less effects and those giant Brass Bug Hives that we're happy to use that on. So that's pretty cool. One thing with the Lyra Bastion is we don't have too many resupply triggers outside of the Reprocessor and the From Reserve Salvager. In fact, I think those are our only ones. So that's a little bit of what's taking me away from playing the Bastion here. Is just, you know, if we had one more thing that's resupplying for us, maybe we'd do it, but I'm a little bit worried you put this thing out and its own resupply is the only one you'd get, which is kind of fine if it's triggering Sierra. You're paying 3 for a double resupply and a brass bug. That's not a bad rate, but I don't know. We're trying to get some lasting value out of these permanents, so that one wound up getting the cut. That was the hardest cut. I certainly like the Colonic generator. If we decided to just straight downgrade the 3 little pigs, but we don't want to cut them, then maybe we trade the Reprocessor for the generator, for instance, is something we could do. But the 3 cost 555 is such an enticing little carrot that I would want to try to get it in there for starting out. Yeah, so, you know, that'll wrap it up for my first go at an altered video. I assume I'll be making these for the rest of the starter decks over the coming, you know, week and a half or whatever until the Kickstarter. We should see all of them by then. I'm guessing they're going to do these like Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of deals, so we get the last one on Wednesday of next week. And then, you know, have a few more days before the Kickstarter launches and be sort of in our final countdown situation. So, you know, let me know what you think. Let me know if you liked or hated the format. Certainly let me know if, you know, what you would do. You know, which 5 rares would you pick? Out of this hypothetical, I spent, you know, $45 on 3 starters to get me started with the game, and then we build out our collection from, you know, the booster packs from our locals or whatever, or roll around the market looking for a few uniques we like. As a starting point, I think this is where I would start, and I would just expect to want to change something, you know, after my first local or 2 with it. But I'd want to try this here. We're leaning in on the big enticing sort of smexy plays here, right? get those 555 pigs, get the giant brass bug hive going on, and see where that can take us. But yeah, so the next one will obviously be Bravos, since I'm on a few days lag here from their actual releases. I think Bravos released today, or no, Lyra released today. Yeah, I'm actually way behind, but that's fine. We'll catch up. I'll do these a couple days in a row at some point here for sure. And it's not like it needs to be right on time anyway. Yeah, so next one, anyway, probably, you know, tomorrow or the next day or something like that. Until then, you know, have a nice week, have a nice weekend. See you later.